Good morning, all. And aside from a couple of little techie issues this morning, it's really great to see you. And welcome to our third and final session of February. And as always, I really hope you're well. And parents, I realise we're on Thursday today. I certainly hope you had a good week off of homeschooling last week. We've had some brilliant feedback on all the events and the sessions, and once again on behalf of not only the Swindon branch but also the wider CIPD, thank you ever so much for coming to these, and all of your feedback is so appreciated. And as I say every week, if you've got any feedback, any ideas, if you'd like to be a speaker, please come and talk to me, and I will follow up on that. So on to today's session, as per the previous events, you are on mute, yet you're unable to share your screen. Certainly, in terms of your viewer experience, I've put it into speaker mode. That can be achieved by clicking on top right where it says View and putting it into speaker mode. In terms of today's session, this is yet again going to be another very interactive session, and Debbie is going to be asking you to make comments in the chat window. Once again, for those of you that are new to Zoom, which is not very many of us, chat can be opened it's at the bottom, in the middle. Click on chat and the box will open. We're also going to be splitting into one or two breakout rooms today, just for some active discussion. Therefore, just to reiterate, your active participation is very welcome. There's also going to be some natural breaks, and we'll have a go at answering some of those questions in between, and then we'll finish off the rest towards the very end. So in terms of time today, we're looking at approximately an hour and a half, and that really does depend on your interaction and questions. As you're probably aware, the event is being recorded, and a copy of this video, as well as Debbie's handout, will be sent out on the usual CIPD mailer on Sunday, and it will go out across all of the social media links as well. I will be sharing these social media links with you as we go along, and what I'll also do is I'll be putting a link to Debbie's slides in the chat box so you can take those away with you. Before we get going, and just to do another quick sound and visual check, Debbie, good morning.
Good morning. Am I there? Can you see me?
Are you okay now?
Yeah. There is nothing more stressful than the techie bit not playing with you when you start off to do a presentation.
It's fine. I think we fixed it. But anyway, thank you for that, Debbie. And as per me shirking my hosting responsibilities, I am going to hand back to Debbie, and she will do a fabulous intro, far more better than I can. So on that note, Debbie, over to you, and give me a shout when you'd like me to start sharing the screen.
Okay, great. Yes. Oh, do start sharing the screen. We'll just have the title slide up. So Lee is going to be my glamorous assistant this morning and move the slides on for me because I couldn't get the screen share to work. So apologies for that. So yes, who am I and why am I in front of you? But first of all, I must say thank you for sparing your time for this, because I know you're all really busy. And are you sitting there in your slippers and in your lockdown hair like me? Though I did try and tidy it up. So these are strange times, but they do offer a great opportunity for us as HR people. So that's why we decided to do this research on HR's reputation. So just to go back a bit, my own background is in HR. I started at the bottom, I can safely say, and worked my way up, did my qualification while I was working, setting up an HR function, and then worked my way up so that I was leading HR functions for Europe in the IT sector and then in the pharmaceutical sector. And then I actually felt that the bit I enjoyed most was developing people. So I decided to set up my own consultancy, and that was actually 25 years ago. And then a few years ago, well, I've always kept in touch with HR people. So I'd go along to all the CIPD events and really keep in tune with what it's like in HR. And actually, I realized that some of the key challenges are still the same now as they were when I was in HR. And I decided to look into that because I get fed up, I don't know about you, but I get fed up of reading papers and various experts saying HR should do this and HR should do that. And they haven't been in HR, so I don't think they realise actually how complex it is and how difficult it can be to raise your game when actually you're just so busy. So I decided to look into that and did some research with my colleagues, and we came up with a framework. And so that's when Enable-HR was born. But I want to kick off, so if we could have the next slide, Lee. I want to kick off because this is a CIPD event. And so I want to really ground it in what the CIPD say. And this research was done just last year in the midst of the pandemic. And this is one of the things that we keep hearing, that business leaders want us to uphold the profession's reputation. And one of the things that we need to do is to create really clear links between what we do in HR and the wider business outcomes. So that was one of the things that we looked into in this survey. Next, please. And you'll all know the profession map, which is such a great development from the CIPD. And what we do fits in with the core behaviours. Next, please, Lee. And these are so these are the 8 CIPD core behaviours. And they're really focusing in on what is it that HR people do that makes a difference. And they're actually still quite wide, although we're focusing in on behaviours, they are quite wide. And I don't know if you've ever designed and run development or assessment centres or worked with competencies, you'll know actually it takes quite a lot of work to get to a point where you can describe what it would look like if somebody was doing these things and how you could evaluate it, give people constructive feedback on it and develop their progress. So that's what we decided to do. Next, please. So we came up with 7 enablers. I'm not going to go into detail about these. There's a slide on them at the end, but I don't want to do like a sales pitch right now, so you can look at those later, but you will see that they kind of take a different slant, because what we're saying is these are things that you need to look at all of the time in order to make progress. So for example, influencing is a huge topic, and when you break it down and say, well, how was it that I was able to successfully influence that person? Or why didn't I actually get their buy-in to this? It's actually a mixture of lots of things. So for example, in perspective, we've got how you actually make sure you've looked at things from different directions and you've got all the information that you need. Because before you go into a critical meeting, you need to do that. And similarly, connection for us is about building relationships so that when you go into that critical meeting, you've already got a relationship with that person. So those are just a couple of examples of how ours work. But obviously we today are focusing on reputation. And this is our definition of it. Winning respect as a major contributor to business success is based on the quality of our relationships. Raising our profile as an HR function, as well as having positive impact with authentic personal leadership. So it is a personal thing as well as an organizational thing and a functional thing. Next, please. So these are some thoughts on today's session. Pace. This is kind of pitched at pretty intelligent people. So I'm going to go quite fast. I want you to get lots out of it. We're going to go into a breakout group fairly soon, actually. So to give you a chance to think about what you want to get out of the session, I'd love you to use the chat function so that we can pick up any thoughts that you're having during the session and questions that you have, so we can capture those for later. And we've got some data here today, the highlights, and there's also a more thorough report. Now, some of you might have already received that because some of you were so quick to do the survey. I think you got into the earlier list. And we've also updated it, not massively actually. So those that, well, I'll send it to everybody anyway, actually, after this, provided I've got your email address. So if you haven't done the survey, but you would like the report, give Lee permission to share your email address and we'll get that off to you. So next, please. So the agenda, we've got the highlights from the survey, some key points that I picked out that we can talk about for today, and the breakout groups. Now, I want to tell you now what we're going to be talking about in that first discussion so that you can think about it. So rather than think of this as a general, vague topic, which it's easy to do when you go into listening mode, I'd really like you to think about who you would like to impress. Who would you like to make progress with? Who is a particular stakeholder or client group where you think, yeah, I'd really like to have a stronger reputation with them? Identify them and identify why is it, you know, what would it help you to achieve if you could build your stature with that person. Next slide, please. So on to the research. Our sample, hundreds of people were involved in the survey, and it involved asking some quantitative questions. I'll explain what I mean by that later, as well as asking you for some free text, and that's been so revealing. And we've got a really good mix of roles. Now, I think this is particularly important in HR because the job title doesn't necessarily reflect your level in the organization. And actually it shows in some of the data that managers might be leading the function but not be on the board. HRBPs can be quite senior, and directors, that role depends on how large the company is too. And advisors too, I can talk to advisors, I was talking to one last week who had a huge level of responsibility. So it's great to have that mix. And we had a few specialists as well as generalists. Next, please. This is a structure for our thinking that we'll use today. So when I talked about a four-part strategy, I talked about the why, the what, the when, and the how. And the why really needs to come from our business priorities. And then we respond to that. And of course, ideally, we'd be partners in building our people strategy at the same time as the business priorities. But in terms of HR's reputation, we've got to keep thinking about what is it that HR are seen to do. And then we've got my actions right now. So what I mean is those moments when you're in the room with somebody, how do you make the most of those? And then there are the outcomes that we achieve as a result and the business results that we therefore help the organization to achieve. Next, please. So first of all, the business priorities. Next, please. So this is what we did. So those of you who did the survey will recognize this. It was just 3 screens. It was really short. But we gave people the opportunity to answer open questions. My dog says hello in the background. That's the postman. So in your organization, what are the business priorities that senior leaders are talking about right now? So it's an open question. So what we're finding out are what is in the front of your minds now? What are you hearing business leaders talking about? Next, please. Building future success, 30% of respondents mentioned this. So that's what we're measuring here. So it doesn't add up to 100, and none of the data in our survey does, because we want to say how many of our respondents mentioned this theme. And of course, many respondents mentioned more than one. So just to explain that, because it will come up again and again. Building future success and surviving are the top two. So very much focused around the business realities that organizations face during the pandemic. Then well-being, which is great to hear, sustaining performance, and then building future culture, and then operational response. So there we had things like the many things that were involved in responding to COVID. Next, please. So then we're going to look at the HR response. So what HR are seen to do, but a reminder that here we've got your perceptions of what HR are seen to do. Next, please. So again, this is just a screenshot to remind you what we did. And we asked you to score this before and after the pandemic, and then why you give these scores. Next, please, Lee. So a really positive shift. This is great news. So again, it's your perception, but there was also really interesting stuff in the free text that we'll come to in a minute that gives some richness behind this data. So yes, HR people do feel that the level to which they are seen by senior leaders as major contributors to business success has moved up 2 percentage points as a result of the pandemic. That's great news, and it'd be really good to hang on to that. Next, please. So then the reasons. So when I say the positives, we gave a drop down. So if you said, yeah, it's really gone up, then we asked you why you said that. And these are some of the things that those positive people said. Opportunity to prove value. That's brilliant, isn't it? 29 people mentioned that they see, percent rather, of people mentioned that they have had more opportunity to work with senior leaders, to show the contribution HR can make, stepped up, all these great things. And also enabled the organization to get through successfully and being represented at the top table. So a few people said that it's as a result of the pandemic that HR were invited to join the senior team. So that in itself is great news. Next, please. So the people who said, actually, it's not great. 24% of people, actually, I think I've got real mentions on here. 24 people said it's still transactional or operational. And some of the comments that people made here, it made my heart go out to them, actually, because I've been there, and I think you have too. You're working really hard. The workload is so great that you're thinking, I'm overloaded, and I haven't got time to make sure senior leaders realize how good I am, and to create the shift into doing work that I know would add even more value if I only knew how to free up more time. And also things like this lack of leadership and being badly resourced. Actually, leaders who are not supporting HR and letting them down in those moments that matter when they're talking to probably other leaders and other people. Lack of long-term strategies, that's another thing that I totally empathize with, because you need that to fit into. And then, of course, the dumping ground. A few people saying that actually there's more emphasis on absence. And clearly what they meant was not from a well-being point of view, more on how are we going to get people back working, and a hindrance. So we won't say any more about that because we know what we mean. Next, please, Lee. So the next question was, what do you want senior leaders to say about HR? And here we've got, again, some great examples that I'm sure will resonate with you, and you may have said some of these things. A truly strategic partner must be at the top table, crucial, change makers, helps the business, and also a sounding board, a critical friend, really there as an equal. So those are the kinds of things that I gathered into this theme. And then we've got enabling better performance. Clearly, that's what we want to be known for. Honest challenge and flexible friend. And championing better working lives, and also commercial and credible. Next, please. So some key points that for me came out of the survey. Next, please. Reputation is built on what people hear you talk about. We're going to come back to that. In fact, we're going to come back to all of these. Talk about the business first and HR second. That's like a key nugget, I think. That's something relatively easy that HR people can do. We'll come back to it. What are your own beliefs about the value that you and HR add? And you'll see why I've said that when we dig a bit deeper into this. Building HR's reputation together as a team. I think it needs to be really joined up to have impact. And achieving progress conversation by conversation. Next, please, Lee. So we're going to put you into breakout groups, and initially do have a chat about what it's been like for you during the pandemic. That's a really important place to start. But then to ask each other, who would you like to impress? Pick a stakeholder or a client group where if you had a better reputation with them, if they held you with more respect and listened to you more, it would help you to achieve more. And what would that be? Okay, Lee, over to you to set up the groups, and we'll do that for 15 minutes, or 10 to 15 minutes.
Right, so I'm going to do this now. I'm going to set the breakout rooms. I'm going to assign automatically. We have 25 in. Debbie, how many do we want to put into each room?
Well, I was hoping for 4, but I think...
if I go 6, then I think that will we'll start with that and we'll create that. And we're going to go for 10 to 15 minutes, yeah?
Yeah.
Great. I'm just doing those now. And let's open all the rooms. Hopefully people should start be going into the breakout rooms. Fingers crossed, eh? Just going to pause the recording.
So I haven't gone in.
Resume recording. Hopefully,
well remembered.
Yes, hopefully I've managed to switch the recording back on. A couple of people that have, I just need to readmit through. Shut the breakout rooms and welcome everybody back into the room again. I hope you, or we hope you find that session very, very useful. Before we go into the next piece, and it's an interesting one that Andrea brought up, and Debbie and I have been discussing this whilst you've been in your breakout rooms, and it was the guy from Octopus Energy who headlined yesterday actually on the BBC with My £1 billion company as no HR department. When you actually read the article, it talks about having no HR department and no IT department, which we find quite astonishing considering he's got 1,200 people. And the article was very, very interesting, but the thing that Debbie and I were talking about was if he chooses to scale, or if he chooses to potentially sell or merge that organization, I really question on how he's actually going to be able to do that without having, you know, any formal HR department. But it's a discussion point. Debbie, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, and actually, while we think about this, do put in the chat your thoughts after that discussion that you just had. I hope it was useful. put some thoughts in the chat, and then or any questions, and we can pick up on those. It seems to be a good way to handle the feedback. Yeah, I completely. It goes back to that point I made first off, doesn't it? How annoying is it when people make remarks like that about HR, and I just think they don't understand. I think he's showing his ignorance personally, and I'd love to sit down and have a chat with him. And I saw it on LinkedIn this morning, and I was delighted that Dave Ulrich had weighed into the conversation, and I did too. And you know, Dave Ulrich always says HR isn't about HR. And he's right, because if we think that the HR function is there for its own sake, then we shouldn't exist. And I completely agree with that. And I also agree with the point that I think all of us will feel that you know you're doing a good job in HR when actually you start doing yourself out of a job. And you're getting line managers to do the things that line managers should do, and it does free you up more time to do the added value stuff. So it does make you think. I suppose the second question is, why do people like circulating that article? Why do people feel it's okay to disrespect HR? That's the other thing. So Tara makes the point, I'm sure this is right. It might be the CEO's ignorance, but it's also our responsibility to demonstrate the difference that our work makes. Absolutely. Octopus Energy has people who do HR, but not grouped into an HR department. So that's interesting, isn't it? So it may be that if we were to actually ask the question, he'd say, actually, I've got a really innovative way of doing HR. But that wouldn't have got him the headline, would it? So that's probably
No,
why.
it's interesting that in the chat here, it's opened a can of worms, which is fabulous. In that they do have people that do HR and IT. They just haven't grouped them into being in that pool of people. And somebody had mentioned a little bit further up that they do have it's actually Maxine, thanks for that. They do have a people director, and then they just don't have a specific function, but they have functions, i.e. recruitment, comms, learning and development, but just don't call it HR. Interesting. Anyway, I think there's some interesting ones there. Shall we move back to the sessions? And so the first comment that's coming from Andrea, thank you from the groups, very useful. We discussed the difference between impress and influence.
Somebody said that actually when I was doing this with the West of England group, and it was an HRD actually, and he said, I really didn't like that. I didn't like the thought that I'm supposed to impress people. And then he said, I thought about it afterwards, and he thought, actually, if I've got to get their attention, then I do need to impress them. So I do want to challenge you a bit, really, because I think that the going out intentionally to boast or say how great we are in HR, it doesn't sit comfortably with HR people. So we do need to find our own individual way of doing it so that we feel comfortable doing it. But modesty isn't necessarily the best way of making sure that people appreciate you. So, and we'll come back to this actually, and I've got some stuff in the report about it as well, about making sure that you can demonstrate your understanding of the business, actually get it into your sentences. The language that business people use, make sure that you're using the same language. So actually another HRD said to me a while ago that business leaders can get so turned off by HR jargon that they never bother to find out what it really means. So we've got to make sure that we're speaking the right language. Okay, let's see. Yeah, cultural fit. What's in a name? Yes. Being assertive, yes. It's really interesting that I've heard that word more frequently just recently. I used to do assertiveness programs, and then it seemed to morph into something else. And so, for example, political intelligence or presence and influencing. But assertiveness means actually stepping forward and making sure that we embolden ourselves. And we're going to come back to that when we think about your beliefs, because they drive our behavior.
It must also be
So,
very
yeah,
interesting,
talking about the
Debbie.
impact of redundancies in the HR team. Oh dear.
What's been quite interesting here, Debbie, is the word impress versus influence.
Yes,
And is impress the right word?
you choose whatever works for you, as long as it means you're not hiding your light under a bushel. We're heading for a discussion on the imposter syndrome. Yes, very common. And somebody mentioned gender as well here, didn't they? Which has got to be another factor. Most people in HR are women. And, you know, when I first started out, I used to have to be honest, though, I did start my career as a secretary and then got into HR and did the qualification and everything. And I used to have to practically sit on my hands to stop me taking the teacups out or offering to make the tea, because it was just so inbred. Of course, it's my age as well, I have to say. That isn't the value we add. As Maxine said, highlight the value we add, the time it takes, and the work we do. Brilliant. So we're all on the right page for talking more now about how we do this. So next slide, please. Do keep putting things in the chat, because it's a really effective way of participating. And then when we get on to a bit later, depending on time, we'll have time to do a bit more and exploring things that would work for you. Next slide, please, Lee.
Debbie, is that not moved forward?
That isn't for me.
Okay,
No,
there's.
head shaking.
Okay, what I'm going to do is go back to.
This is because we couldn't do it on mine, and Lee had to move between his desktop and his.
Has that come back?
Yes.
But it's not come back in the right place, has it?
Well, it is, but it's not on slideshow yet. So I think we'll be all set when you go on slideshow.
There we go. Has that come back?
That's it. Brilliant.
Lovely.
So now, so you see, we've been going down this sort of cascading thing. So everything has to start with the business priorities. I'm stating that as if it were a fact, but it might be an opinion for you. Think about what you think. Then it's the HR response. What does HR do, and what is HR seen to do? And then the reason I focus in on this next is because most of HR's reputation isn't built when we're in our own offices, behind our computers, or even actually in one-to-ones with people lower down the organisation. Sadly, we don't get a lot of credit for that, even though we should. It's actually built during those higher profile conversations that we have. So next, please, Lee, and we'll look at what we learned from the data on that. So we asked, it's a statement actually, we use the frequency, no, we use the agree, strongly agree scale on this one. I personally have a reputation as someone who helps the business. And it's true actually in any survey that if you say to people, my function has a great reputation versus I personally have a great reputation, they will always put a more favorable response to I personally have a great reputation. So this is a really nice piece of data here. If, however, we operate as a whole function, then you can leverage your reputation much more strongly, especially if you're all saying the same thing and really consciously together working on your reputation and working out how to do that, which we'll come on to. Next, please. So again, we asked the question, why do you give these scores? And when I looked at these, I thought they fell into two main themes. One were these very behavioral, real attitude kinds of things, like being responsive, proactive, getting things done. And I think that HR have had a fabulous opportunity to do that during the pandemic. I mean, never before have there been regulations coming out one day where the Prime Minister has said, you've got to get this in place tomorrow. It's really been a great opportunity as well as a challenge to show that HR can do things that fast. And then credibility, going above and beyond, facing tough decisions and being the sounding board. It's lovely to think of HR people really rising up in that way. And then the contribution, there is stuff as well that HR have contributed to that I think is really positive, like well-being, much higher on the agenda, and you've had the ideal platform for that. Coaching, asking questions, consistent, accurate and creative ways of making sure that people can deliver, and influencing, enabling and supporting. And then there's a great quote here that I think demonstrates to us an opportunity. I'd like us to challenge this statement and make it more confident. So this person said, there has been more pressure put on me as HR manager to advise the board as well as support them in their decisions. I think this has led to some recognition of the value that my role provides to the business. So I think this sums up the opportunity, because imagine this person felt confident enough to say, I have grasped opportunities to advise the board and they've really listened to me. I've contributed to their decisions. I will make sure that I take this opportunity to get their recognition of the value that my role provides to the business. So it's like a shift in mindset and confidence. Next, please. So those who found it more difficult, these are the things that they said. And you'll recognize these, and they were similar to the themes that came up earlier. Focus on the operational stuff. You have got to do that. That's the real challenge, isn't it, with HR, which is why it's so great if you can get people to get your business to support you in automating as much as possible. Too much of the old school mindset. Too busy having to do the tough stuff as well. And the things that HR people have used the opportunity to maybe get people to do more of, encouraging managers to approach you at the right time and being better informed, which of course is a two-way street. And again, a revealing quote. I'd love us together to shift the balance and the confidence behind this statement as well. I have positive feedback on how supportive I am, but I'm not sure how that translates to business success. For example, closing a deal or getting new business. Next, please. So what you want what our respondents said they wanted leaders to say about them personally is values-led, supportive, team player, and these are percentages here. 31% of people said professional and values-led. So when I say values-led, I'm kind of thinking of the things that are in the HR values bit about, the integrity and support of the team player. Professional and competent, 26% of people said that. Business focused, 23%. Partner, influential and trusted, 17%. And challenging, 8%. Next, please. So then we homed in on stakeholder relationships. So this hopefully will help you to think about you may be thinking about the person that you identified earlier. I have high quality stakeholder relationships that get me talked about in a positive way. And again, we've got a positive shift. As a result of the pandemic, respondents feel that their relationships get them talked about in a more positive way than before. Great news. Next, please. So again, just a screenshot there were just 3 screens in the survey. I hope you realised it was a short one. Anybody that would still like to do it, please do. Just let me know and I can send you the link. And this question is, I manage HR's reputation proactively. Would you please go to the next slide, please, Lee? And here we use the frequency scale. Now, the frequency scale is often really useful, and we use it in our evaluation tool because it isn't, well, if we used a qualitative question here, it's less valuable to say, well, actually, I do sometimes because I do with this person, but I probably don't with that person. And if you can identify what you do with the people where you know you do this well, and relate that to the people where actually you'd like to improve that, then that could be a really good way forward. So we had, relatively speaking, 2/3 of people who say they do it most of the time or always. When we did a breakdown of this, actually 92% of HR directors say they do it most of the time or always, whereas 66% of the overall population say they do it most of the time or always. So there's work for most people to have this at front of mind more of the time. Next, please. Again, we asked the question, there was a drop down, depending on how positive your response was. What helps you to do this? So here people said communicate and influence, 28%, deliver 17%, values-based or team behaviours were in this theme, understand the business 9%, challenge 6%, work as one HR team. I would like that to be higher up the list, and I think if you think about that after this for your HR team, there's a lot of mileage in that. Proactive, responsive, quick, and the expertise and insight actually comes right down the bottom of the list, which is interesting. And this great quote here, positioning HR as a driver of strategy. That's what helps us to build HR's reputation. Next, please. What makes it hard? And yes, time at the top of the list and workload. And the transactional activities, not being able to get out of the reactive cycle. Lack of confidence and frustration, that is hard to hear, isn't it? And I have to say, I've been there. I had one CEO who just didn't get it at all. And I have to say, I left because I just didn't think I could change him. And that's absolutely soul-breaking. Lack of authority and autonomy. And just one specialist saying, actually, some of our Centre of Excellence activities don't come across as fitting the business. Next, please. Now, this, for me, is the big takeout. So I really want you to think about this. When you do a comparison here about what you perceive business leaders talk about, I've put in together the percentages of building future success and surviving, because they're really about these business imperatives that organizations have right now. And then when we look at how HR people want to be seen, it looks different because we've got values led at the top. And then we've got professional and competent. And then we've got business focused. And I completely get this. And it reminded me of a story of when in fact, it was that CEO that I mentioned, where I went in to see him and I needed to get pay rises for a particular client group. And they were salespeople. And we had this terrible problem of churn of these salespeople. So I did the normal analysis of it, and they were severely underpaid against the market. So I went, and there were other things that we could do that didn't have quite such a cost, but I put the spreadsheets together. I knew he wasn't going to let us do it all in 1 year because it was actually a large amount of money. So I thought, well, we'll do it over 3 years. And so I went in and said, so we've got the problem is that they obviously it's causing a lot of hassle for the sales managers. We've got all the recruitment costs and all those things that I know you'd say, yeah, that's true. But what I should have gone in with was, if we address this, we can increase sales by X. That was the only number that man understood. So I should have gone in with that, and I could have worked that out. If only we'd known then what we know now. That's what I would do now. So we're going to look at this further because it really taps into our beliefs about why we do it. And I think it also reveals information and insight about why a lot of us go into the profession in the first place. And I have to say that I went into it because of the values-led thing. And I did love the professional and competent side. I didn't tune into the business bit until quite some time later. So I can be quite honest about that. This is hindsight, but it's very revealing. Next slide, please. So next, please, some survey insights. So let's think about this. So this is where I start to sort of go into what you could do with this data, with these insights. What do you believe about HR and the role you personally want to play? Because if you don't believe you're a business person, then the business words won't come out of your mouth. If you believe that your role is to be supportive, then that will come across in everything that you do. And we don't have to choose between the two. I think this is my big takeout, really, that HR can be both and must be both if we're going to turn this reputation around. Don't throw the baby away with the bathwater, because everybody in the organization, whatever their level, do need to feel that the HR person is the person that they can come to when they've got an issue. Because when you rise up through the organization and you become the HR director, you still get that happening. You still get people coming into your office with personal issues or issues they need coaching through. So you still get that at every level. It's just that the level of them goes up. So we cannot throw that away. We have to do the other thing as well. Next, please. So just a bit more about that, because if you go into a meeting, for example, your beliefs about that situation and about yourself leak out of you. So I think, going back to my Salesforce issue and that very money-minded CEO, he knew me by reputation and personally, and he knew that I was somebody that really cared about people. And I'm quite sure that would have just shown, it's just so these poor sales managers who are having to, might not put it like that, but I'm sure it would have come across like that. This is so difficult. HR sales managers having to re-recruit the sales reps who are allowed to fail, and that would have leaked out of me much more strongly than the business rationale for doing that. So your beliefs drive your behavior, and that drives what other people feel about you, and that reinforces them because they respond to you in that way. So that reinforces your own beliefs. So I come back to this imperative really of challenging your own beliefs about how you really add value, because if you shift the belief, the rest follows. Next, please. So coming back to this point, just linking these 2 points, that the real power to make a difference to anything, I believe, and in particular to HR's reputation, is those actions in that meeting face to face. I know we can't do actual face to face much right now, but you know what I mean. It's how you come across in those interactions with people. Next, please. So then the challenge is, well, how can we do that all of the time? And this is something for you to think about. Once you're clear, so actually first be clear, become clear. How do I want to come across? What do I want people to say about me when I'm not in the room? What would that look like? And then consider the occasions when you can actually come across in that way that you've consciously planned. So for example, create them. Okay, I really want to shift the perception that this stakeholder or this client group has of me. I'm going to create an opportunity to shift that perception. It might be a meeting where you say, I'd like to come and have a chat with you generally about where we are with things, how I can help you. So you've got an open agenda and you're really sort of making a mark in the sand to say, I don't just want us to have a reactive conversation. I want us to talk about the future. Occasions that you can predict. So there are occasions. So if you think about that stakeholder that you mentioned earlier, when are you going to see them next? You probably can predict when you're going to see them next. It might be a regular meeting, a planned meeting. You know that you might have the opportunity. So it might be that you know you're going to get a chance to influence that group in that meeting, or that there's a particular person that you might get a chance to talk to just before or just after. Then there's these water cooler moments that hopefully we will have more of again, when you know you are going to bump into them and you can have this thing ready. It's the kind of thing that we used to talk about. We used to call it the elevator pitch, but it doesn't have to be a pitch. It can just be some little phrase that you know comes across well and that does sum up how you want them to receive you. So then just get those into your mind so that they slip out of the mouth easily. If you can do that as an aligned HR team, then that's great. And one of the workshops that we do that's really powerful is with whole HR teams, where we get them aligned in terms of how they want people to perceive them. And we use our self-evaluation tool to help have that conversation. So they go out together with a script, if you like. Next, please. So a technique, now this is a build. I didn't realize this. So do build the whole thing and I'll talk you through it. So HR advocacy, for a start, is a term that you've probably heard. And it's really useful because, and sometimes people call it employee advocacy, which of course we can get caught in as well. And I think, so do click through and get everything on the slide, Lee, because I can't remember what order it comes up in. And I think that actually we are better at the advocacy. No, we're not. That's the opposite of what I wanted to say. We are better in HR at asking the questions than we are at doing the advocacy. So that's what I'm saying. Shift the emphasis. Go in and tell people about the great stuff you're doing, and if possible, link it to the business. So being effective, and it's just these two things really. It's such a simple model, and it relates to conflict management and all sorts of other things as well that you will have seen. This vertical axis is so often about being clear yourself, sharing your own goals, knowing what you want in the first place and getting it across, explaining why it makes sense. And this is where our beliefs fit in as well, because you can actually say, I believe, or I believe in, I know that if we do more of this, it will result in higher sales. I stand for. You may not say it in those terms because that might not be business language, but be clear and stand in your own space when you're doing the advocacy. Because you will also invite the other person to explain their world. And I know that you will already have good questioning skills. You will already have empathetic listening, and you will be very good at respecting their needs and values and priorities. So creating this technique is really strong. Next, please, Lee. So there might be a relationship that you would like to reboot. When you think about that difficult stakeholder, then here's a suggestion. That you say to them, my relationship with you, my working relationship with you is really important to me. And I actually think if we could get this to work better, we'd get better results, both of us. So could we have a meeting where we talk about that? And actually start with the ask. It's very easy for us to assume that we know what, especially if you work with this person for years, you might think, how can I go back to basics and admit that I don't really know what goes on in their world? Well, they will love it because they know that we all know that other people don't know as much about our worlds as we think they do, and they think we do. So let's reboot. Let's say, and I like the term rebooting because, you know, when you reboot your computer, you do it because you've got too much going on. You've got too many programs running in the background. Think of those as all your preconceived impressions, all your bias about that person and this relationship. Shut it down and refresh it. So these are some tips on how you could run that. Next, please, Lee. These are our 7 enablers. I'll let you read those afterwards. Please do. Next, please. And we've got a cue. Let's now take the chance. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We can go through the chat again. And also, there's my book. I think that's on the next slide. Thank you. So I'm not going to dwell on this, but there it is in your slide pack. I am so chuffed that Dave Ulrich has read it and feels it has something really strong and positive to communicate to the HR world. So he kindly is endorsing it, which I'm very proud of. And it comes out on the 11th of March. So let's go back now to the previous slide because I don't want to spend too long talking about that. Just to remind you, let's go now into chat. What are you thinking? What would you like to ask? And I will get Lee to do some moderation on that.
So what I've done is I've just come off of mute. Apologies for a couple of little glitchy errors or little glitchy things. We've trying to control the slides and the chat room and everything. Screens running everywhere, but it's all good. So we've had some really great comments actually. And I'm going to have to try and scroll back up. Some lovely chat as well between Emma and Tara around. Going back to the water cooler moments, that's the bits that we're probably really missing at the moment in terms of, it's those things that you hear, around when you're making a coffee, and sadly those aren't happening at the moment. In some great stuff around, from where you started, in a very different career, and there's been some stuff that Maxine's commented on. I don't know who Kay Bush is, so I can't call you by your first name, sorry. She was a commercial sales leader before moving into HR, and find real value in focus on outcomes and what it means in terms of delivering against the business goals, objectives when seeking to influence.
What a good background to have. That's really unusual, isn't it? Coming into HR from sales. And I think that'll stand you in really good stead. Well, it might have already. You might be a CHRO, because I don't know your job title on here. But I think that's a great background. And in fact, I've just started talking to somebody who is in the sales world, this whole Salesforce world, because he realizes that actually sales has become like this whole other silo, and yet they need to work with HR. It'd actually be interesting to talk to you further about that, Kay. Do link up with me afterwards. I'd really like to talk to you about that, if you wouldn't mind. And sharing how you do that maybe is something that we can then share with the rest of the group.
And Maxine as well. Morning, Maxine. I know Maxine. Actually, good afternoon now. Even I do know I'm still in the morning. I do know Maxine relatively well. And in terms of Maxine's background, she was in operations before, for 15 years before moving into HR. So providing a commercial-based HR approach has landed big wins. You're able to speak their language. Wouldn't
it be great to have a session on this?
Wouldn't it be just?
Building the business case, and I've been doing some work on it, and I've built this thing called the HR success model that I'd love to try out with somebody, actually, because we've really got to crack this. So I'm doing a webinar with HR Zone and Sage people in a while, and that really made me think, how do you, and I don't know the answer to this, if we think that part of our issue in HR is that everybody's so busy, the obvious answer is to get more automation. I'm talking too much, Intel. How do you make the case for that? And how do you find the time to make the case for that? That would be really interesting, wouldn't it, to share with people who've done that.
It's an interesting one from K is for Karen. Thank you ever so much for that, Karen. Do apologise. I didn't want to make any assumptions there, but thank you for correcting us. Emma, good morning, Emma. Thank you ever so much for your comment here. In the 80s, I learned most of my business knowledge from listening in the old smoking room to the CEO and business leaders.
I always used to wonder what I was missing from the smoking. Yeah, because I used to notice that people of all levels would be there smoking. Oh God, I remember the old smoking room. Any particular tips that you would share from the smokers? And how's your chest these days?
And some of the stuff in terms of sales directors, the biggest challenge. Jackie, thank you. Teachers are pretty tough too. And Tara, sales can be a tough team to partner with, but if you do something that really helps them where they are, they can be your friends for life. Thank you for that.
Excellent. I've just made a note to follow up with you about that.
So some lovely comments there. Now, in terms of
Any
you know,
questions?
no, I haven't seen any questions, but if there are, then we're more than happy to you know, to answer them. What I was going to say is, if there are any questions offline, I've actually put a copy of the slides as well as Debbie's LinkedIn profile into the chat window. And in fact, I'll do it again. I've put it in 3 times. Well, this will be the 3rd time, so at least you can connect with her. Debbie, if you'd like to pop your email address into the chat window as well, because
Yeah,
you mentioned as we were going along, and I didn't write it down, there were some insights from this that you're able to share with people. And maybe if people want that insight, if they want to email you directly, I'm happy
that's
to
a good
take
idea.
that. But if they email you directly, then we will do that. And Jackie, in terms of your message that just comes through, there will be the recording coming to this, and it will go out onto the CIPD website this week. Debbie, thank you for popping that into there. Are there any other questions? I haven't had any come through at the moment, but
Or any things that you think you might try now as a result of this session?
if anybody actually wants to come off of mute, then please feel free to do so. You know, this is a Q&A session for you folks. Don't be scared. I think we'll leave. If there are any other questions, then of course, you know, as Debbie said, she's more than happy to take those offline. Debbie, is there anything else that you'd like to add today?
I don't think so. Just to say thank you all for your input. I hope you found it useful. I'd love to keep in touch with you. I am on a mission. HR is so important. The work that you do affects so many people, not just the employees, but their families too. And especially with the world of work changing, new ways of working, and the opportunity that there is now for you to create really strong partnerships with people around the organization to make sure that you get the right solutions going forward. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
No, thank you for coming to present this today. I have got a slide that there we go. In terms of where the information can be found with regards to the videos, the slides from today, as well as those that are in the chat window as well. We can be reached on any of these channels. So we've got the main email address, we've got the Facebook group, we've got Twitter, the 2 LinkedIn groups there. We've also got the YouTube channel as well. Please bear with us on this. It is work in progress. I say that every week. It's not as simple as we would hope it to be. And Debbie, thank you ever so much for coming to share this with us today. Some really great insight there, and some questions that one needs to ask to be asking ourselves. There are a couple of more things that have come in, so I'm just going to see if there are any questions in there. No, it's just feedback to say thank you very much. Really enjoyed it, which is what we want to be hearing. So, like I said, we will get out the recording once I've edited it. It'll go out on these channels. It'll also go out on the CIPD mailer this Sunday. We can be contacted on any of these. Now, I'm also going to just ask David if he'd like to come off of mute, because we have just relaunched the member mentor to mentor scheme. David, would you like to come off and just do a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lee. Before I do, Debbie, thank you very much indeed for this morning's session. Really illuminating and engaging, and I shall certainly be going back through the slides. I'd better move on because Lee gave me 30 to 60 seconds. So a quick plug for the branch member-to-member mentoring scheme, if I may, which, as Lee says, we are reinvigorating. So the focus initially, at least, will be on career mentoring for branch members. If you would like to act as a member, or if you feel that you would benefit from being mentored, then please have a look at the weekly branch newsletters that come out every Sunday. or at the CIPD branch website, and both of those will explain what to do. And I'll stop there. Lee, thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much, David. If you are interested, the email address is on the top. If you'd like to find out any more, then do email. And as David has mentioned, the easiest way probably is to go on to the our web page. There is a lot more information, and there's also some things there that you can find out and get involved in with regards to the mentoring. Also, just to add in there, we are looking for a student engagement lead. This is going to be the liaison between the branch and the students. Very, very vital role, obviously, for the grassroots of HR. So if anybody is interested in taking that role and coming to join on our wonderful committee, then we'd be very, very pleased to hear from you. With regards to the next events, so next Wednesday, the 3rd of March, from 11:30, we've got Sue, and I've forgotten Sue's surname, that's terrible, How Not to Waste Your Money on Wellbeing. Following Thursday, the 11th of March, again from 11:30, what is psychological safety and what exactly does that look like in the workplace? The Self-Employed Network Group are running an event the following day on how to create impact with social media. Another great event there. We are then taking a week off, and then we'll be back towards the end of March with Thrings solicitors coming to present to us on diversity and inclusion in 2021. There will be then a 3-week break for the Easter holidays, and we will then be back at the end of April with one of the speakers that's been with us an awful lot, a gentleman called Richard Roberts. He's the people director for Pure Planet, and he's going to be talking to us around what does it mean to be an exceptional business partner. So unless there's 2 more things in the chat, I do think they were just saying great session, thank you. So on that note, once again, folks, thank you for joining. Debbie, thank you for presenting. Have a great rest of your week, and I look forward to seeing you next week at the next event. So on that note, stay safe, and bye-bye, folks.
Thank you. Bye.